Mandi area on the Punch-Rajouri axis, Punch-Rajouri Jammu axis south of Pir Panjal in Jammu and Kashmir. The encounter is still on. Additional forces have been mobilized to encircle the terrorists. Drones were also launched in a thickly forested mountain terrain. There have been multiple encounters south of Pir Panjal in the past 2 years, and terrorists are trying to reignite the terror fire in an area that had just a couple of years back had officially been declared as terror-free. More details coming up on India First. Also on the show, India tells Canada the core issue remains Canada giving space to extremists and anti-India elements. This after Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau sensed a tonal shift in India's position. That story coming up at 10:30 tonight. I'm Gaurav Sawant as always. Let's get started with the headlines at 10. 3 soldiers killed in action in Jammu and Kashmir's Rajouri anti-terror operation zone after 2 vehicles in an army convoy ambushed. A 3rd major ambush in Rajouri this year alone. Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh's close aide Sanjay Singh gets elected to the UP wrestling body's top post. Wrestlers hit out in protest. Sakshi Malik hands her boots, quits wrestling. Three more opposition MPs suspended. Total suspensions now at 146. The opposition India Alliance bloc protest claims murder of democracy. The contentious CEC bill passed in Lok Sabha in the absence of suspended opposition MPs. Government gets final say to appoint Chief Election Commissioner with a panel of the Prime Minister, a Union Minister and the Leader of Opposition in Parliament. Three soldiers were killed in an ambush with terrorists in the Mandi area on the Punch-Rajouri Jammu axis south of Pir Panjal in Jammu and Kashmir late this afternoon. That encounter, we are told, is still on. The soldiers, according to initial information, had specific intelligence inputs about the movement of terrorists and tracked down some of these terrorists. Now, just as contact was established with terrorists, just as the firing started, reinforcements were sent in, and this is when an army jeep and an army truck, and you're looking at the images of that army gypsy, that jeep was ambushed by terrorists, and this incident is reported to have taken place in the general area of Dera Ki Gali in Mandi. There have been multiple engagements between terrorists and security forces in this belt south of Pir Panjal since early January this year. Just last month, 5 soldiers, including 2 young army captains, were killed in action in the Kalakot area. Pakistan-backed terrorists have been trying to rekindle the fire of terrorism south of Pir Panjal for close to 2 years now, since massive deployment of security forces in the Kashmir Valley resulted in a better security grid being in place north of Pir Panjal, especially in South Kashmir. India Today's Sunilji Bhatt now joins me for more on this story. Also with me is my colleague Shiv Arur for more perspective on the story. But Sunilji, I want to come to you first for the latest. What's the latest about this encounter? Has a contact been re-established with terrorists? What more can you tell us?
Well, Gaurav, a cordon has been laid in this entire area of Dera Ki Gali because the security forces want to ensure that the terrorists don't take advantage of the darkness and they manage to flee. The firing has stopped, but when tomorrow the security forces will once again try to establish contact with the terrorists, and as per the security establishment, there is presence of terrorists in the twin border districts of Rajouri and Punch, and as per our sources, 15 to 20 terrorists are present in the upper reaches of Rajouri and Poonch, and most of them are Pakistani terrorists. So Gaurav, this is a very serious matter, and the terrorists have been able to, revive terrorism in that south of Pir Panjal to some extent, and we are seeing a pattern in last 2 years that encounters are taking place, the attacks are taking place on the security forces. The security forces have tried to change their strategy, but given the terrain of this area, it's a very challenging, area. This area is surrounded by dense forest, tall mountains, and at times the visibility is very low. So it becomes very difficult and challenging for the security forces to carry out an anti-terror operation, and that is why it's going to take time. That is
Stay
why
with me,
Pakistan is
Sunilji, but
focusing
why
on
aren't
these-
drones being used, if they're in higher reaches? Operation Sarfinash was launched at covered Operation Sarfinash, and that entire area in Poonch had been cleared of these Pakistani terrorists. This area just a couple of years back, Sunilji, was declared free of terror. Let me quickly bring in Shiv Arur into this conversation, because Shiv, the situation actually appears to be deteriorating. What's the reason? Is it because some security forces were removed, but that was in the depth area? The LC grid remains strong. Where is the problem with multiple setbacks in multiple anti-terror operations?
Now, 3 army men are confirmed dead. At least 3 more have been grievously wounded, and they're fighting for their lives right now. It's important to remember that the encounter operation is still very much on. The Thana Mandi area of Rajouri sector has been an extremely restive place. This is actually the third, large-scale loss of life. More than 2 people dying in one particular encounter. Just this year, there was one in May in which 5 special forces soldiers lost their lives in a single encounter. On November 25th last month, less than a month ago, you had 5 persons, 5 army men, including 2 officers, losing their lives in the Rajouri sector itself. So the south of Pir Panjal area is proving to be an extremely challenging, sector, because despite the abrogation of Article 370 and the reduction in violent terror incidents and encounters overall, the fact is that there continues to be, escalations of this kind, and the ability to ambush army patrols, which is a most disturbing trend in the Rajouri Poonch area, that continues even now. So this is probably going to lead to, a strategy change as far as the army is concerned in the Rajouri Poonch area. This area has continued to be challenging for a very, very long time. So the army will have to take some very tough decisions. Now, it's so close to the line of control. A ceasefire has been in effect. No ceasefire violations taking place, but this continues to be an infiltration highway. The army is going to have to look at it very closely now.
Okay, Sunilji, help me understand this point. So, the first ambush could have been a surprise. The second ambush could have been a surprise. This is the third army vehicle which is now being ambushed. Somewhere down the line, perhaps the terrorists know the standard operating procedures of the army very well and seem to be luring the soldiers into an ambush.
Absolutely, Gaurav, you have hit the nail on its head. This calls for a thorough review of the strategy that is being, implemented by the security forces. As you said, that this is not for the first time that ambush has been laid on the security forces. So this definitely calls for a thorough review of the strategy. And Gaurav, as you said, that the security forces are being lured to go to the encounter site, and then terrorists are, hiding at strategic positions, and then they target the security forces, their vehicles. So it has become very challenging for the security forces, given the fact that we are losing precious lives, and in the recent encounters we have lost senior officers, we have lost para commandos. So it's a matter of huge concern for the entire nation, particularly for the security establishment. And as you said, that there should be change in strategy, drones should be more used, technology should be more used, and limited airstrike is also an option that the security forces need to explore. And there are reports that in the recent past many meetings have taken place, important decisions were taken, but still we are losing precious lives, and it's a cause of huge concern for the entire nation. Gaurav.
Of course, security forces know best how to deal with this situation. They're experts, they're on ground, they have the training, they have the tactics, but we'll track that story very, very closely. Sunilji Bhatt and Shiv Arur, for the moment, many thanks for joining me. Let's now shift focus to the other big story we're tracking here on India First, and that's the long march of the Baloch women and children, and of course the elderly, against enforced disappearances in Pakistan. Thousands of women and the elderly have taken to the streets, and you're looking at those images from Pakistan. They've been targeted by the Pakistani security forces. Many were detained in Turbat. Some who reached the outskirts of Islamabad were not permitted to enter the capital and protest where they wanted to at the press club. Why are the Pakistan army and the deep state so scared of unarmed women protesters from Balochistan?
Pakistan police using water cannons to stop Baloch women and elderly from entering Islamabad to protest against enforced disappearances of Baloch youth targeted indiscriminately by the Pakistan army and security forces for decades. Terrified of global attention being forced on Pakistan Army's atrocities in Balochistan, the Pakistani security forces have tried to lathi charge, assault and arrest Baloch freedom fighters across the country. In fact, the Baloch Yagjahati Committee, the organizers of the Long March, have taken to social media platform X to lament they are not being allowed to visit the camp of missing persons at the National Press Club in Islamabad. The Pakistani security forces have forcibly taken away keys of all the vehicles that were a part of the Long March to Islamabad convoy. The participants of the Long March who sat on the road to protest were assaulted by the security forces.
ये हमें बता दिया जाए कि ये बयानिया अगर आप रियासत ने क्रिएट किया हुआ है कि सिर्फ बलूचिस्तान में बैठकर बलूचों की सिर्फ हमें बलूचों को तरक्की के बदले में लाश दिए जाए, इनके परजिंदों को उठाया जाए, तो ये वाज़ा करें.
Sadly, none of the major rights organizations in Pakistan or overseas have taken up the atrocities of the Pakistan Army and security forces with either General Asim Munir, the chief of the Pakistan Army, or with Anwar ul Haq Kakar, the caretaker Prime Minister of Pakistan, who incidentally comes from the Kalat province. The March of Justice against enforced disappearances in Pakistan is led by Mehrang Baloch, a prominent women rights activist. She too protested against not being permitted to enter Islamabad to protest.
हथियार थमाए हुए हैं ना, वो वहाँ कत्ल और गारत कर रहे हैं, उनके किस्से सुनाने आए हैं, आपके अजीब पाकिस्तान के किस्से सुनाने आए हैं.
इस्लामाबाद की इंतज़ामिया हमें इस्लामाबाद में एंटर होने नहीं दे रही है और हमें बारहा कहा जा रहा है कि सिक्योरिटी थ्रेट की वजह से हम आपको प्रेस क्लब में स्टे नहीं करने देंगे, हम आपको किसी पार्क में जो है ना जगह देंगे. क्या इस विफाक में बलूचिस्तान से आए हुए लापता अफराद के लवाकिन के लिए कोई जगह नहीं है? क्या ये प्रेस क्लब सिर्फ और सिर्फ मफाद परस्त इलेक्शन के टोले को ही जगह दे सकती है?
It's not just on the outskirts of Islamabad, but the protesters have been stopped in multiple areas. Pakistan Army was deployed to stop the protest at Turbat. Thousands of protesters have been detained, taken to secret locations, and are being held without arrest. The protesters have questioned not just the political leadership, but also the silence of Supreme Court of Pakistan.
हम बारहा कह रहे हैं, मुसलसल कह रहे हैं कि ये एक पुरअमन मार्च है और इसमें हमारे पास लवाकिन हैं, हम अपने बुनियादी हकूक़ के लिए आए हैं. इंतज़ामिया जो है ना हमारे रास्ते में रुकावटें ना डालें और हमारे साथ कोऑपरेट करें. हमारा मसला जो है ना इंतज़ामिया के साथ नहीं है, इस स्टेट के साथ है, इस्टेब्लिशमेंट के साथ है.
The protesters have been putting out videos on social media with the request to the judiciary to intervene. Islamabad has deployed its army to stop the long march from Turbat. Thousands of forces have been deployed, including military equipment and weapons. Along with the long march, the families of missing persons whose loved ones have been imprisoned by the state for years also want to record a peaceful protest. Commentators say Pakistan fears the rise of a freedom struggle both in Balochistan and in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and resorts to a brutal crackdown. Bureau Report, India Today.
So braving icy cold weather, the women are on the streets. One demand: stop enforced disappearances in Pakistan. The question remains, now that these women are being picked up and forcibly being sent to Quetta and other parts, is the Pakistani deep state scared of unarmed Baloch women? Joining me on India First is Abdul Samad Yaqub, a political analyst from Pakistan, and Sushant Sareen is a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, someone who keeps a hawk eye on developments in Pakistan. Abdul Yaqub, don't Baloch women have a right to protest in Pakistan? Are Baloch second-rate citizens in Pakistan, sir?
Excuse me, can you repeat your question? I missed that voice touch.
Why aren't Baloch women being permitted to protest?
Well, I mean, at this point, I firmly stand with these Baloch peoples. I mean, they are the equal citizens of Pakistan. They must be treated as an equal citizen. I mean, the atrocities and the crackdown being committed by the caretaker government, I strongly condemn that. The sad states of affairs when the Prime Minister of the caretaker Prime Minister of the Pakistan belongs to the Balochistan, then the Chief Justice of Pakistan belongs to Pakistan, Chairman Senate belongs to Pakistan. I mean, they are the peaceful protesters who came from Turbat to Islamabad. They have reached in the freezing temperature, and the way they are dealt by these atrocities. I mean, I strongly condemn. I mean, I cannot stand with that.
Okay, but why is this happening? That's the question. Sushant Sareen, when thousands of women take to the streets in Islamabad, when Pakistan army targets protesters in Turbat and locks up protesters, men separately, women separately, separating families, when the Pakistani media remains silent, why is this happening? Have they finally succeeded in exposing at least a section in the Pakistan army?
Gaurav, if you can hear me clearly, your question wasn't very clear, but I got the broad drift of it. Let me first clarify what my friend Yaqub has just said. I think he's being disingenuous when he says that the Baloch are equal citizens of Pakistan. They are not. They've never been treated as equal citizens. And just because you have a couple of quislings as the puppet prime minister, this Kakar fellow, who's not even a Baloch, he's a Pashtun really. And you have a couple of other of these quislings. Now, Quisling, just because he was a Norwegian, does not make him a patriot or does not make him, somebody who cares for Norwegian people. They are collaborators. So these guys are collaborators. Let's not talk about them. On the substantive issue, why these protests are happening and why the Pakistan army is so scared. I think the Pakistan army is scared. They're terrified of peaceful protesters simply because they don't know how to handle them. They have only one instrument of handling peaceful protesters, which is bludgeoning them into submission.
Yes.
And what has happened is that for the last 75 years, both Pashtuns and Baloch have been bludgeoned, even the Sindhis. But the Pashtuns and Baloch in particular, they have been bludgeoned. And now there is a massive resistance, a peaceful resistance, which is brewing in both the Pashtun areas as well as the Baloch areas. In Balochistan, for example, this is not the first long march. There was a long march held by this man, Mama Qadir, many years back, who actually walked the entire distance. He did not travel on a vehicle. And everybody ignored it. The so-called independent Pakistani media, which writes in Washington Post and all over the place and prance about and talk about the Indian media and all of that. Not a peep out of those guys. The Pakistan mainstream media can't even carry these things anymore.
No.
Right? Even if they carry it, it'll be really watered down. So there is no blanket coverage given to them. The Pakistani political establishment. Let's talk about Mr. Yaqub's party. When they were in power, Imran Khan, did he ever utter a voice, a single word in support of the Baloch who were being oppressed?
Let me take that.
Let's talk about Nawaz Sharif. Has he ever uttered a word in support of these guys? Asif Zardari will go and make his deals out there, and his twit of a son will talk, a lot of progressive nonsense all over the world. But when it comes down to the brass tacks of the Baloch, who have been struggling for basic rights, they're not asking for much. They're asking, in this particular case, Gaurav, if you study what happened to this boy Balash, who was killed in custody, he was initially arrested. He was produced before a court, after which the cops took him out, another 3 people along with him, shot them in cold blood. And then they said the standard excuse that we were taking them. The cops in Pakistan always take people who are suspects they take them to a particular place for identification, always late in the night, never during the daylight. Then they say that somebody attacked and in the crossfire, these 4 people died. This guy was in custody of the cops. Okay, the entire judicial system is quiet. The entire media is quiet. And let's talk about the thekedars of human rights sitting in the United States who keep talking about, a lot of things all over the world. When it comes to this kind of massacres in Balochistan, silence.
I'll come to these thekedars of human rights. I'll come to these thekedars of human rights in just a moment. But I want to understand the factual position because Abdul Samad Yaqub, there have been instances, the Baloch themselves have been talking about it, men arrested by the army, taken up in helicopters and thrown out of helicopters alive, boiled in coal tar where roads were being made, shot dead at point blank range on a video phone. Should these cases not be investigated in a transparent manner? And namalum afraad, when they take away the Baloches and where they take away and where do their bodies just reappear after 1 week, should all of this not be investigated, sir?
Well, any extrajudicial killing must be investigated, and it should not be repeated, or it should not happen at all. But the fact of the matter is, the way we as a state deal with these Baloch people are, there are 2 types of Baloch. There are a BLF, a terrorist organization, the followers of the active members of the BLA, Baloch Liberation Army. If they take the guns against the state, they must be dealt with the iron fist. I mean, this is clear. No matter.
Sareen, iron fist for Pakistan is take an unarmed Baloch on a military helicopter several hundred feet and throw him out of that helicopter alive.
There was no such incident which took place.
Sir, it is a well-recorded incident by human rights organizations in Pakistan. Of course, buried, you wouldn't read it. Sushant Sareen. Oh, okay.
Hello?
Sushant, can you hear me? Okay, give me a moment. I'll try to reestablish that audio link with Sushant Sareen in just a moment. Sir, these are all, Abdul Samad Yaqub, these are all recorded instances of Pakistan Army atrocities as mentioned to human rights organizations and entities, sadly never investigated in Pakistan. But I want to understand, since you mentioned the BLA, since you mentioned Baloch Liberation Army, has Pakistan lost control of some areas in Balochistan to China, for example? Chinese administer Gwadar. Pakistani Punjabi Muslims have taken up most of the jobs, even in Gwadar, that are not taken up by the Chinese. So, as far as the China-Pakistan economic corridor is concerned, is there anything in it for the people of Balochistan, except, of course, clean toilets?
Well, first of all, let me correct you that there is no single area which is administered by Chinese or any other external power. I mean, this is very clear. Gwadar is administered by the local government. Although there are the projects which were carried out by these Chinese, some collaboration and some partnership, but that doesn't mean that the whole city is administered by. And secondly, I strongly object when you in your introduction were calling this Marang Baloch as a freedom seeker or as a freedom. I mean, I won't call her a freedom fighter. I mean, she's a citizen, peaceful citizen of Pakistan. But you
just
are
consider her. Please consider her as a citizen of your country. You don't even consider that. But Sushant Sareen, you consider Baloches as second-rate citizens in your country. But Sushant Sareen. Can Pakistan continue to get away with murder in Balochistan, exploit the resources and expect the people in Balochistan and the world to remain silent?
Gaurav, Balochistan is undergoing its 5th insurgency. And according to my calculation, this insurgency, this latest insurgency started in 2001. It's been 22 years. It's ongoing. There are ebbs and flows, but it hasn't ended. Their alienation of the Baloch citizenry in Balochistan is total. They're completely alienated from Pakistan for reasons of survival. They might kowtow to these guys, but otherwise, psychologically, they've completely broken away from Pakistan. Now what is happening is something even more dangerous as far as Pakistan is concerned. There is a common compact being made between the Baloch freedom fighters and the Taliban insurgents. Very clearly, we can see that nexus developing. There are some joint operations also, which we believe have been carried out in the recent years between these two guys. The Taliban have not molested the Baloch who are settled in Afghanistan. They have not molested them. So there is that nexus which is developing very clearly. At the political level also, you have the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement,
yes,
and you have these Baloch guys. They are coming together and making a common front. How successful they will be, how many more of them will be butchered by the Pakistan army is another question. But I think the resistance is there, and most importantly, you know, Balochistan is a very, very conservative area, very orthodox people, also very secular in their own way. And yet in this very conservative society, when women start leading a protest, Gaurav, when women are spearheading protests, when they are coming out on the streets for the protection of their fathers, brothers, sons, husbands, you have a very dangerous situation in your country. Unfortunately for Pakistan, the generals are such dumb guys, as Asma Jahangir called them, these duffer generals. They simply do not have the political instinct to reach out to these people, to try and satisfy them, to try and take care of, you know, the basic demands which they have of basic human rights. They're not ready to do it.
So,
and the politicians are so compromised that they are not ready to do it.
Let me get Abdul Samad Yaqub to respond.
No-go situation.
You know, we'll talk about the duffer generals in just a moment. But the fact that, one, women are leading these protests. Two, you have the Baloch, the Pashtuns, and if I may by extension, the Taliban coming together. This, Abdul Samad Yaqub, perhaps is Pakistan's worst nightmare. Trouble in Balochistan, trouble in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
Well, when you talk about the Baloch liberation or the Baloch freedom fighters, I mean, there is another Balochistan. I mean, some part of areas exist in the Iran. When Jandula carried out terrorist attacks against the Iran, I mean, you condemn them. You yourself have even Sushant Sharif have a double standards about the same cause. When it comes to the Pakistan, when it comes to the Pakistani Baloch, they support them. But when it comes to the Irani Baloch, they condemn them. I mean, you should have at least the same standard for the Jandula and the same standard for the BLF.
But for the moment, I want to restrict myself to the problems within Pakistan, sir. I want to understand from you, how do you read the Baloch fighters, if you don't want to call them freedom fighters, they call themselves the freedom fighters, the Baloch gunmen, if you prefer, the Baloch gunmen and the Taliban gunmen coming together?
I mean, see, we have a challenges. I mean, there are growing concerns and we have a challenges. We have, there are, even in the past, there are some kind of alliance between the Sipa Saba and TTP and some other organization. Militants have a tendency to make alliance against their common target. I mean, this is the fact. I mean, even in Kashmir, you are facing the same things. I mean, multiple terrorist organizations get alliance and target the Indians' targets, so territory. So same are the challenges we are facing in Balochistan. I mean, there is a growing presence of TTP. We are fighting not only against the TTP, but the insurgents. We have a counter-insurgency strategy. I mean, and we are doing very well. I mean,
so you may consider you're doing very well, but the difference between India and Pakistan is, in India, it's Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror. Lashkar-e-Taiba is Pakistani, Jaish-e-Mohammed is Pakistani, Hizbul Mujahideen terrorists are living in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. As far as the Baloch people are concerned, they are in their own country fighting for their freedom. As far as the Taliban and the Pashtuns are concerned, they say Pakistan is illegally occupying Peshawar, Sushant Sareen. There is a huge difference that Pakistan refuses to see.
No, and there is no comparison. You know, Mr. Yaqub is lamenting about the Taliban.
One by one.
I have always opposed the Taliban. I have never supported any Islamic militant group. It is Mr. Yaqub and others of his ilk who always held them up as freedom fighters and liberators. His party leader, Imran Khan, said they've broken the shackles of slavery.
Yes.
I didn't say that. Now, the fact that they have turned their guns on the Pakistanis, the Pakistani Punjabi is, screaming blue murder. When initially it was the Pakistani Punjabi who actually, gave wind to these guys. As far as Jandullah is concerned, I have never supported Jandullah. I have never defended them. But Iran has a problem. Iran has a problem because it's a Shiite supremacist state, and these are primarily Sunni tribesmen,
yes.
and there is a certain amount of oppression which is taking place. Iran can very easily address it, but again, like Pakistan has its generals, Iran has its mullahs, so they don't address it. As far as Jandullah is concerned, Jandullah had very close links with the Pakistan ISI. They were working together at one point of time. So what is Mr. Yaqub giving this cock and bull story to all of us?
That is precisely the point.
And
let me get
comparing
Yaqub.
it to Kashmir, Gaurav, is a complete travesty.
Yes.
But there is no comparison because Kashmir is entirely a state-sponsored terrorist gangs who are operating in Kashmir. This is not, it's not the case with the Baloch freedom fighters. They are fighting on their own. They have no state support. They don't have support from anybody. And in any case, forget about them. Let's talk about the peaceful protesters. What are you doing with the peaceful protesters? You don't even give them the right to protest peacefully.
They're not even permitted to come up to Press Club of Islamabad. But that's the point,
Exactly.
Yaqub. Your leader, your Prime Minister Imran Khan ordered freeing of multiple Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan terrorists and that they be brought to Pakistan when they were in Afghan jails. Yes or no? Now they are killing you. So
yes, we did. Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
So, how can you blame anybody else when the problem lies within your country, sir? Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, your people. Taliban, you kept them in your country for 20 years. Today they are saying what you're doing is wrong when you remove Afghans from Peshawar and from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, because that's not Pakistan. That is extended Afghanistan. They are on their own territories.
See, when it comes to the TTP, they are Pakistani citizens, same as the Baloch terrorists, which we call them a terrorist or you call them insurgents. The 70 Baloch, including one of their leading Sardar, who surrendered in front of the state, and we have accepted him. It happened yesterday. I mean, we have accepted 70 Baloch who were fighting against the Pakistan army. They are now back to. They have accepted the constitution of Pakistan, and they are now merged in the. They have accepted the mainstream of the Pakistan. So same is the case with the TTP. Anybody who surrender in front of Pakistan and who accept the constitution of Pakistan and the
Sir, you live in Kuku land. Very clearly, Pakistan army and government lives in Kuku land. They may surrender today. Tomorrow they will kill you once again. You know that, and yet this is happening in your country.
Now,
you know that better. But I want to understand from Sushant Sareen. Sushant Sareen, is Pakistan in deep trouble, not just in Balochistan, but also in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, because the Taliban have made it very clear they don't accept the Durand line. And as far as they are concerned, all the way up to Peshawar is the land of the Afghans.
Gaurav, I just need to push back on what Yaqub said.
Okay.
The problem is not that the Baloch are not ready to accept the constitution of Pakistan. The problem is that the Punjabis are not ready to play according to the constitution of Pakistan in Balochistan. They violate it at will. And what the Punjabis want is that the Baloch become subservient to the Punjabi interests and serve the Punjabi masters, colonial masters, and do not have any agency of their own, which the Baloch are not ready to accept. And this is exactly the nub of the problem, which Mr. Yaqub is not ready to accept. Now to your question, Gaurav. Yes, I personally believe that the situation on the AFPAK front is only going to get worse and worse. In fact, what is happening is that if this Baloch and Pashtun, nexus starts becoming something bigger than what it already is, then it is even worse for Pakistan, because then the geography in which this insurgency spreads is much, much, much bigger than what Pakistan can handle. On top of it, when you have a weak economy, you are into a war of attrition. It saps the vitality of your country. It saps all investment coming in. Who's going to invest in a place like Balochistan if bombs are going off or hostages are being taken or violence is happening, street protests are happening on a regular basis? There is no investment coming, right? So all these fancy wet dreams that the generals have, SIFC and what have you, all of that is going to come unstuck. So clearly, what they need is a kind of reconciliation. But what they are going is doubling down on the failed policies of the last 75 years, in which they think that all that you need to do is bludgeon anybody who raises his voice, anybody who demands rights in Pakistan. You beat the hell out of the guy, and everything will be hunky-dory for people like Mr. Yaqub and others like him.
Except that it
form the
won't
1% of Pakistan.
It won't be in the next couple of months and years. Is that a ground reality now in Pakistan? Trouble at the AFPAC border. Afghanistan doesn't accept the Durand line. They say that Pashtun movement will pick up pace, as will the Baloch freedom struggle, and your army cannot handle trouble on these two huge fronts, sir.
Well, we can, if you're talking, I mean, if we remain limited to this Baloch issue, I mean, would Sushant deny that these Baloch terrorists were being treated, medically treated in Delhi and in the hospital of India?
Immaterial, sir. You're not answering my question. My question is trouble for Pakistan army on multiple fronts. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in Balochistan, in Sindh, the rising demand for Sindhu Desh. I'm trying to understand from you your internal troubles.
There is no such demand, and as far as terrorism is concerned, yes, Pakistan army is facing serious challenges against the TTP. TTP got strengthened since Taliban took the power in Kabul. Yes, we are facing the challenges. I mean, I'm not in the state of denial. I mean,
but Imran Khan clearly was when he said breaking away shackles of slavery of 20 years.
I mean, how can you mix this? If some nation, I mean, that is entirely in other contexts. I mean, Taliban in Afghanistan are not a terrorist. Would never call them terrorists. I mean, they were fighting against the external, the occupier, the intruder, invader.
Now they're fighting against you, sir.
They consider you.
Sushant sir, in last 20 seconds, now they're fighting against the Pakistan army and the Pakistani state, including at borders, artillery rounds now being exchanged. Sushant Sareen.
With the help of India.
Yeah, so Pakistan's duplicity, their games of deception always come back to haunt them. And this is exactly what has happened. Yaqub is making that same distinction which the generals used to make between good and bad Taliban.
Yes.
Even though the good and the bad Taliban were joined at the hip, they were born from the same womb. Now, he's saying that the Afghan Taliban were okay because they were fighting against the Americans whose money Pakistan was taking, and they were still pretending, and they still are, that we are a major non-NATO ally. We are more allied than any of the allies of America. So they were ready to become pittus of America.